I saw a piece on YouTube where they had redone Starry Night. I think
Vancouver, yes.
They did that. Did you see that and done in
Animation?
no, they'd done it in. Well, it was Lego is what it was, but they hadn't built it. They hadn't snapped the blocks together. They were standing them up like dominoes.
Awesome.
So they arranged, and it showed this time lapse of building it.
Dude.
And which looks sort of pixelated a little bit. I mean, there's gaps between them, so you sort of have to mentally blur it to get the picture. But then they hit the right one, and the whole thing slowly folds in on itself and fills in the picture. So now they're all lying down, and so now it's a complete
picture.
Yeah.
That's hard. I mean,
they for the time lapse they had it was from overhead and they were working on the floor, but they've got this battery powered wall clock that's always in the picture. Sometimes they have to move it someplace else, but so you're seeing the time go around, the hours going by as they're doing it.
It's really cool.
The hour hand is almost going around like not as fast as the second hand, but it's
It's moving.
Yeah, that was just earlier this week.
Okay, so it's I guess
Time.
3 minutes past when we're supposed to start, and we're serious here. That's 2 more than I had feared.
You got 2 more than I got in my presentation.
What's yours?
I was doing one on logical line manager.
Yeah, that's a shame. You should do that again so I can listen to it.
So the purpose of this is that I really like the idea of DevOps. It has some perks, but the science is evolving. But my job is to manage a network, and I'm looking at the lack of tools that are readily available to do that. So there are some tools that try, like Puppet actually has a plugin that can do that. I think it might be integrated later, like in or something. But it has strange little assumptions built in, like the main var is actually the name of the switch port. So if you have more than one switch that uses the same naming convention, this is going to suck for you pretty quick.
Yeah.
There's vendorware. Cisco makes their thing that does this, but it's pretty much just a tool for people who don't want to run the command line. You can click on things and you drill down to a port, and then you set the options you want on that port.
Right.
There isn't, that I know of, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, a tool that can say, for a certain class of ports, and we're going to somehow tell you what ports go in that class. I want spanning tree port fast, I want this to be an access port, and here's the database lookup to see what VLAN each of those access ports should be in. For this other class of switch port, I want it to be a trunk, and here's the database lookup to see what VLAN should be allowed on that. And since it is a trunk, we'll put in use spanning tree for a function there. For switch to switch links, it'll be those rules. For other things, it'll be those rules. And oh, by the way, here's some way that we can figure out when VLANs must be instantiated on what switches, things like that.
Can I ask you real quick?
Yeah.
Do you have sound?
Yes, and I believe it will hear me. I haven't tested that more than a little bit.
Okay.
My hope is that I'll transcribe this, and anything either I or you guys say that happens to be useful, I can put in the notes or a blog or something. And my goal is not just to whine about the lack of tools to do my job for me, because doing my job might be too much work, is actually that I hope that this is sort of a journal that at least has a chance to grow into a tool. And maybe I'll contribute to that. Maybe some of the stuff I've already put on GitHub, someone will improve and make better. Or maybe I'm just doing it wrong, and someone will educate me, and I'll do it right, and I'll be making improvements to that. So that's where I'm at. I guess I could talk about what tools I see that are sort of the they're not even bricks to build things out of. It's like, here's some clay and here's some hunks of granite that we can use to build an oven to bake the clay. Because like Postgres has great data types, so it can do like cyber as a data type, and you can say, is this IP address in this address range, and the database knows how to do that and does it efficiently and all that cool stuff. OpenNMS does not use that functionality. I don't know why. OpenNMS only sort of monitors. It doesn't really.
Right. It doesn't push.
Yeah, it doesn't actually use it. And I understand there's a lot of people who like it that way, and I understand that. But I think the world probably needs some way of doing that push, because I've got a modest-sized network of 30 stacks, about 100 switches. I'm not going to log into them all and type things. When I did that, and I had my people doing that, we made tons of mistakes. And so I wrote a horrible little PHP thing that and that used some of the guts out of Rancid that would actually log into things and do the most common switch port things. And okay, that was like 1,000,000 times better. Yeah, you could actually hook up a computer and have a pretty good chance of it working. And I think that everybody else with a job similar to mine has done the same thing, has written maybe not the same PHP code, maybe somebody wrote it in Perl, somebody else wrote it in Rails. But I'm thinking we should be sharing this. Maybe we should be building on each other instead of, reinventing this wheel, except, with different size spokes or something, over and over and over again. So that's my rant, that's my quote. Tell me what you think.
I'm still figuring out how the words fit together.
How the words fit together.
Like, I'm still learning, I'm still a complete noob. I do like the idea of collaboration and everything, and also for me having, seeing a bunch of people's different approaches to something works. So I'm.
Okay. I'm hearing you go, this sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good. Of course.
I'm a little, this is adjacent to what I do, but not what I do. I'm a sysadmin. So in these small shops, in the really little shops, I'm in the IT department, so yeah, I do that too. In the bigger shops, I've got other people do that. And so I don't, almost by definition, I don't run into the larger shop challenges because I think somebody else is doing it. We have dedicated people who do that. But it seems to me like you're perhaps looking for, or I guess I want to ask, are you looking for two things? You're obviously looking for being able to push out configurations, which makes eminent sense to me. I mean, a switch is going to die and get replaced, and you want to push out perhaps the same thing.
Sure.
To the replacement.
I can do a backup of the switch's config. Yeah. And then, the switch dies and I...
Can you edit the backup?
Sure.
Okay, all right. But that's something of a clumsy way to get there, perhaps.
Yeah.
Puppet operates on manifests. This is what we're trying for. How do we match now? Do we still match the manifest? No, we don't. Let's go change something. Are you looking for that approach, or just to push it out and trust that it's still there?
I like Puppet. I mean, my job is network, but I use some systems too, because that's just how it works. Yeah. And gosh, I do this Puppet stuff, and I can fix thousands of machines or break them really efficiently with Puppet. And I would like to be able to do that to switches, or at least to the switch ports.
So like a Puppet for networking, which is what OpenNMS is, or
no? OpenNMS network monitoring system. Yeah. NMS.
Oh right, not management system. Okay.
Well, they call it management. But
do they?
Oh, okay.
It doesn't manage.
But it monitors.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Yeah, so something like Puppet would be really cool. On the other hand, I'm not expecting even fancy switch, or there may be some fancy devices for which you can run Ruby and do something with Puppetish, but you know, the mid-level stuff that I use, yeah, you could have something that runs Ruby, SSH into this, and do stuff.
Yeah, right, which is what I think you have to do. You wouldn't get the intelligence with it.
You know, and then there's done but not unmanaged switches that you can't really SSH to usefully. You have to sort of either do SNMP or, you know, its web thing. And maybe those are just going to be below what we can scalably manage.
Doesn't have to be. I mean, what you're talking about is an abstraction layer. You know, you have an abstraction, a device abstraction layer where above the layer you say, you know, go set this setting or whatever, and in the abstraction layer it says, what kind of switch am I on? Oh, to do it on that one, I've got to go through this funky web interface, you know, or I've got to go through this SSH connection or whatever.
Yeah. Of course, there's, you know, the higher end switches have features that you're not going to be able to implement on the lower end ones, and so the abstraction layer has to be not too abstract, but to be able to turn on, you know, magic QoS bits or whatever, that has to happen.
Yeah.
I don't think this thing really exists. So please jump in if I'm mistaken there. And I don't really know if the best thing is to like take a thing and, you know, basically bolt it onto the side of Puppet. Which Puppet has a kind of cool declarative language, and it might be good to avoid having to, you know, reinvent that wheel. On the other hand, Puppet was kind of built with some assumptions that aren't going to necessarily make sense.
Yeah.
So I really don't know what the best way to do what that is. It might be that, you know, instead of trying to do this sort of top down, I need to like look at this clay and these pieces of granite and roll the furnace and make some bricks, and then release those bricks into the wild and see, you know, who manages to build what. Yeah.
Anybody, I mean, you talk about Puppet having some assumptions. I've worked with Puppet, I've worked a lot with it. I could certainly envision that one of its critical assumptions is that it's got an agent on the other end. And I wonder, which you're not going to get on most, if not all, of the switches. You're not going to get something of your own design in there unless you start writing your own firmware, which is old. You really don't want to go there. So, does anybody know how essential it is to Puppet that have an agent on the other end as opposed to just do it itself?
I know that the plugin for Puppet that does try to do this, basically it runs on a host, not necessarily the Puppet master, and it will run on behalf of the switch. And so it will put down whatever it needs from the Puppet master on behalf of the switch, to log into the switch, and do stuff. I have doubts about the scalability of that, but you know, for networks my size, that could be a workable thing. Or, although you know, it would shame people wearing T-shirts that say with SSH and a for loop isn't enough, because this basically would be SSH and a for loop.
Yeah, right.
With Puppet. But okay, fine. But we can do that with 30 stacks of switches. That's that is a scalable thing. Probably do it, an hourly basis or whatever, and that could be really cool. I've also sort of thought of some of an event-driven thing, where you basically say, I want such and such to happen now, with a sort of known state change in what we want, go and make that happen. And that seems like it might be easier. The other thing is, in networking, if you don't break stuff, it won't be broken. And so, with systems, you pretty much have to make sure that something hasn't fallen off or a process hasn't died, and if it has, you have to restart it or something. A lot of network devices, if you're not making a useful configuration change, usually best practice will do the same to work.
Yes.
And if we were to take a very Puppet-like thing where you run every half hour and you check everything you can find, you compare that against the manifest, and if it's not trying to fix it, it kind of breaks that assumption in that model. And that sort of, well, it's tried and true, but that also might mean it's outdated, best practice. So, on the other hand, you do sometimes know, or you can keep track of these things in a database somewhere, and that's how we do DNS and DHCP, so we're already used to that, and I assume other people are too, or nobody would bother to put those CIDR and INET data types into Postgres, so obviously, I'm not the only one who's thought of this. But I don't think the people who have thought of this and are doing this are talking much. Yes.
Together you tried to research and find.
I have, and I found a lot of people who, will say, yeah, at our shop we have this thing and I can't give it to you, but it does this, this, and this, and we did this cool functionality here, and I've heard lots of stories of really cool scripts that go around and do all kinds of awesome things. And yet they're not, they're mostly done for big shops, or if they're done for an ISP, then obviously they're tied in with the accounting system, and it's, they don't want to give it to their competitor.
Right.
And if they're done for, dollar-big companies, then, well, they probably could release it, but there's a lot of work to be done to get approval for that, and
A lot of trouble and why.
nobody ever does.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know. So, I mean, the thing that I've done with what time I have and what assistance I can, capture, it probably has a whole lot of Portland State specific stuff in it, maybe assumptions that I didn't even think about, but I threw it up on GitHub. I wasn't very careful. I haven't pulled it down to make sure I can rebuild it again, but I'm willing to do that. It would be really cool if somebody wanted to do that. Just try it out and see, gosh, can I make a thing that can keep track of a network? And if necessary, you can start small, but my hope is that it can scale at least to hundreds of switches. That's I don't know. And if people then have a thing that they can contribute back to, I'm not married to any of the code that I wrote or that I got other people to write. So if somebody does a pull request that's put some code.php with Ruby or something, fine. I don't care about any of that. Mostly what I want is for the effort I've done to have more reach than just my network, because I want to grow, and then two, I want the tools. As much of my job is that I can make it do.
Is what you're sharing the scripts that are in NetworkDB, your repo, that have been there for a while, or have you recently added
I haven't recently added it.
Okay, because when I look at those scripts,
I know it needs a big.
I'm just unclear, about sort of what they are and what what context and all that. And part of that's not knowing what all the words mean yet, but I would think it'd be fairly easy to put up a wiki page and sort of make it a project that sort of says, hey, this is a project. Feel free to come and contribute. Here are our expectations. Here are kind of have it.
Source work would certainly be a candidate.
I'm kind of already got it on GitHub. GitHub
Yeah,
has
GitHub
this, so
Yeah.
I can put stuff up there. So I guess the basics of, I started with I need to keep track of this stuff, because if I have people working for me, I can't keep it all in my head anymore because I didn't do it. So I put it into a database. So we keep track of, host name to MAC address, and IP address to host name, and hopefully that's all match up. Keep track of wiring, so what switch and switch port goes to what jack in the closet. We actually have a database of all the jacks and all the rooms and all of our spaces. Obviously, the data of that is not going to be useful for anybody else in the world, but you're welcome to the schema, and you're welcome to learn what we're doing. I will say that the wiring database, or the wiring table, turns out to be all kinds of useful, because somebody looks at a wall jack, and they say, hey, jack 84 isn't working. Then, you're like, well, I wonder what switch port that is. Well, you have to keep that knowledge somewhere, and it works okay in Postgres. We also do some observation there, so we have SNMP collect basically the net media table and the bridge table, and throw them all into, so we have the first scene and the last scene of each MAC address, IP address pairing, as well as each MAC address switch port pairing. And we can tell, if you see notifications come in, we can tell, what did an IP address and a timestamp. We can tell what MAC address was using that at what time, and even at what switch port. Gosh, now we have accountability on our network. What else do we have? And we have some other stuff that just sort of helps make things go in terms of keeping track of where all the jacks are, keeping track of what jacks go to what closet. I have not yet figured out how to keep track of fiber, because instead of having, 83 is here and 83 is in the closet, it says on one end 2 room 0015, and on the other end it says 2 90-10. And you kind of just have to know that those connect together. So I'm almost thinking that doesn't really lend itself well to a relational database, because the world isn't normal. But
What does it lend itself to? What's the answer to that?
Might look differently. Might look differently.
and if it was up to me to decide how their things were labeled, I would.
Cable 83.
But yeah, that would be nice. And I could give identifiers to them. But that identifier still wouldn't help, and I want to know, well, is this free, is that free, or where does this go?
Yeah.
So it might mean that I need to have some other kind of database that can keep track of a list of waypoints of a circuit and give that thing device to jumper to cable to jumper to cable to jumper to switch port, circuit ID or something, and keep track of what all the things are. So definitely not done, not even in the more classical sense of releasable, but in the open source way of release early, release often. Here, tell me what I did wrong. Be a little bit gentle, but not so gentle you don't tell me what's wrong. And by all means, let me know if I'm missing resources. If this clay that I could sort of is either the wrong kind of clay to make bricks out of, or if there aren't bricks over there, please let me know. I suppose I might talk a bit about what bricks I've seen, if there's interest in that. Postgres I've seen is a beautiful database engine for networking stuff, because it has things like MAC addresses and INET, and it knows about cyber. And it knows about cyber, both IPv4 and IPv6, and it deals with them beautifully. It's not hackish in any way. Rancid it's an okay tool for a specific job, but to do that specific job, they had to make some bricks. And one of those bricks is clogin, and there's like slogin, or not slogin, but several other vendor-specific logins. And they're basically expect scripts or wrapped around STLN or SSH. And holy cow, clogin is so useful to me for all kinds of stuff. And so I don't use Rancid itself, but I install it and then use its guts. I highly recommend that. It would be cool if, instead of having PHP or whatever call this external program, there were better libraries for using SSH within PHP and Ruby and Perl and stuff. But that they either are just wrappers for calling the external program, or they're kind of poorly maintained, and that's been sad. The only management system that I found when I was looking that actually did try to manage or like change things was Packet Fence. And it has stuff in it that will try to change a VLAN and stuff like that, and it tries to be smart about that. However, I found that it is terrible about relying on CPAN. By relying on CPAN, I mean, yes, you actually do have to go to CPAN. You can't get these things from Apprium, and they're so far out of date that it's painful. You have to have specific versions of Perl that aren't the current ones, and I'm sure this must work somehow. So there probably is at least one version of Perl for which they always want it to work, but it's not easy to even get it up to the point where you can have a script that just says, fine, change that VLAN on that device to this. And doing that seems to require a whole lot of muckery with CPAN and building code. Puppet is great, though it's in terms of its language, it seems like that's a really good brick that I would like to slap down some border and build on top of. But it does seem to have some post-centric assumptions, which is not bad. It just is. And then I guess the scripting language features.
It seems like you've got an added risk. I suppose you have it to some lesser degree with Puppet like the host, but in changing configurations of network elements, switches and so forth, is that partway through your sequence can be a change which causes it to lose contact with you. So now you can't finish out the sequence because you just changed your own switchboard.
Yeah.
And you didn't get to finish the process.
Yes. And I suppose you could argue that that could be a problem with Puppet in general. And if you try to reinstall a new version of Ruby using Puppet, you will be sad. And sure, I'm completely seeing that there could definitely be some operations that you can say, no, I can't use this special tool here. I have to either think carefully about which way I'm needing to this switch to make these changes, or take a laptop and actually plug into a console and do it now. So that kind of tells me that it'd be really good if I can make whatever tool this is spit out the configuration stuff, and then I could paste that or something.
If you spit it out as a backup image, you can restore it.
That too. I mean, most switch or pretty much any network device, you can tell it, save a copy of your configuration here, and if it's, a reasonable device, it'll also be key readable. It'll just need a text file with declarations of what to do.
Right.
I know the robot I do activate hosts does that on every, it activates a host and saves the config file. Another robot that checks that into RCS, by RCS, because I wrote it a long time ago. That's what it is. And then, we have history and we have backups in case something happens.
Right.
And I guess there's nothing wrong with having the robot look at that and then make changes, but you can also just SSH to the device and see the current state, like the state something in the error state.
Yeah. I definitely think that you're going to have an infinite number of kinds of devices out there, because even if you code for every device you've got in your shop now, come back next year and you're going to have some new device or that kind of thing. So I really think you're going to want to do most of it as a device independent structure so that you can plug in new drivers, if you want to call it that, for the newest brand that came out that you've started to look at, or the Cisco that's not like any Cisco that ever went before, or whatever.
that's a really good idea. I certainly want to at least have like, here's our, the template for this kind of thing, and that kind of thing might include some hardware specific stuff.
Yeah, you're going, yeah.
But if even the configuration language is different, instead of config terminal, you want to do,
Yeah, you're
terminal
gonna,
config or something.
you're gonna have different commands.
Yeah.
But at the higher level, you want to be able to say, back that guy up. I don't care what he is, back him up, Give me a back button that I can restore to him, and sometime later I might say restore his last image, without saying, oh, that's a section size, we gotta do it this way, you want the code to do that.
Right. Or even, port this on that switch, make it ENUM 12.
Right.
I kind of might not care if that's a Cisco or Juniper or, that anything else. And I think Rick Chapman did some stuff on that, but it's kind of, that's as far as it went, because he had, describe the language, and I guess if the language is how you describe it, I will use it, but the language wasn't like better than any of the other languages that we used for configuration. It was just different and there were converters. And of course it was incomplete. So if you want to do new fancy QoS stuff or even firewall stuff that's much older, it's an exception to that.
You need something extendable,
Yes, extendable.
both in terms of devices, but as you're pointing out, also in terms of fields or characteristics.
Yeah.
You wind up needing a device type, a device model definition. This class device has these fields to it,
Right.
and many of which, or a number of which will be common, but there'll be other ones that are unique to that device.
Yes. I'm almost thinking that probably might even have to be some sort of inheritance thing, because I know that like
That's
Cisco 3000 types, whether they're 3560s or 3750s or 3750Xs, all have a whole lot in common.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
I wrote a piece of code. I've never really found anything quite like OpenMS or a similar class that do all the things I want to do and check them the way I want to check them. So I've got some code of my own that I use, which I recently, through the inside of what hadn't worked before, rewrote. And one of the things I did was it's plug-in oriented, so that in the config file of services or whatever it is we're supposed to check is essentially an object type. First time I see this, I got to go load that object type. And now when they say check, I go run the check routine for that object type, which might be can I connect to a TCP/IP socket, or it might be can I do a ping, or it might be, is the file system space below this threshold kind of thing, So that, because I'm not going to think of all the things I want to check, right out the door. So, and I've got a base class of check, and care off the care. Something, like that. I think that's the thing that we do on version 2.0 because we didn't think of it in version 1 is how to remove the restrictions.
Yeah.
How to remove the assumptions we've cooked in the first release. So that's a problem because it doesn't handle this case, this model, or this.
Yeah. Version 1.0 usually starts with just, I've been, pushing the same button all day. Can I make a desk tool or something to push that button for me? And it's pretty much following the same workflow that a human would do. And then, later we figure out, well, actually, we really wanted to do this.
We used to call that the water duct.
Exactly.
You remember the little play, drinking ducks?
Yeah.
We wanted to aim one over the enter key because there was one place in the boot up software you just had to press enter a bunch of times.
What are some of the centric attributes of it that is this?
Centric actions. I'm not sure how to answer that without turning into either code or implementation. But if you learn to use Puppet, it runs on this machine and it does this stuff. If you know, all the things it tries to do from its own host key that it uses to contact the Puppet master to looks at what services are running actually by default. Yes, I guess you could try to make it do basically a PS over an SSH instead.
Yeah.
But all the stuff that comes with Puppet begins with the assumption that that's how it is.
Like you're running an agent, the agent has got these facilities available to it.
So it pretty much assumes that the Puppet agent is running on the host that you want to manage. Which makes a lot of sense if you're managing the host.
It seems like though if you ignore all of the predefined resource types, you just use the define your system and then define resources, you can actually do pretty much what you want to do.
You could get pretty close. If you just have providers, that makes it kind of hard to use the same SSH connection to the same switch for the whole run. So you would SSH to the switch, do a command, there's that connection. SSH to the switch, do another command, there's that connection. It would at least be inefficient.
Go further down the rabbit hole and try and integrate Puppet with switches, you could say we don't actually want to make just types and providers. What we want is a proxy agent that runs as a separate entity on the network. It generates its own set of facts from the switch, connects with a different certificate to the master, retrieves the catalog for that entity, downloads it, and sends it back to the switch. But that's really messy.
Well, but you don't have the facilities on the switch to put an agent there.
Right.
So if you're any way you do it, somebody's going to be providing the intelligence that you can't provide in the switch. Somebody's going to be talking to the switch and telling you in its own terms, this is what I want you to do, whether that be a central, something like a Puppet master, whether that be a proxy, because you want to farm it out.
The main thing is, the more think about it, if you did want to integrate it into something like Puppet, you would have to build a full proxy agent, not just a set of types of providers.
Yeah.
It would have to be perceived by the Puppet master as a separate entity, or it would really break down most of the usefulness of Puppet.
So that's an interesting point. Are you envisioning, I mean, I can see places for conflicts there because the proxy is running on an agent, and quite reasonably the Puppet master needs to manage that agent, that machine too.
Which would be a separate agent process on the same
machine
with a different certificate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mess with the Puppet master's mind.
Yeah, I guess you could, if you wanted to sort of get halfway there with a little bit less work, you could basically just have the proxy thing be part of that proxy host's own manifest. But that means that all its manifest is going to be messy, all kinds of messy, and it's all the stuff that it has to manage has to be for itself, and then it has a bunch of switches and then switch ports that you have to manage namespaces for, and that's going to get unscalable.
So what you could do is you could design a full-scale application, implement it as a type and provider, and whenever it runs, what it does is it starts up the proxy agent, contacts the switch, generates the facts, contacts the Puppet master while the other one's still running. As a separate agent, downloads the catalog, applies it, and then falls back into the first.
Yeah.
It's okay.
That's going to get yeah, so that's what we mean by it has some host assumptions. Which is not a dig on Puppet, that's the problem they were trying to solve, and they did a much better job than their predecessors, so yay.
Well, this is classic open source, and even just programming is you're good. What like that? It was never built for that. I mean,
Pretty much.
I've been in the field for 30 years, and this was happening, when I started, That was for engineering calculations, and you can't do finance on that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if anyone tell me I'm doing this wrong and use the keyboard and are saying, yeah, we should do that.
Go for it.
Yeah.
All right.
Give me very small defined chunks and I'll help.
I will
Check
try,
list.
but I don't know what those chunks are. Like not till
Give play, show them over
Plans for the kiln would be nice.
there. Why?
Some sense of dimensions.
It might have something to do with how big a piece of granite you can find and lift.
Well, they're having to build a boat first.
Yeah. So I am AVRNS at USAID. And also at Gmail. And GitHub.
I was gonna ask about the GitHub address.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I haven't checked that.
Pretty sure it is.
That is my username there, so if I got the format of the URL wrong,
You're good.
you can search.
And the project that you were talking about earlier is like gonna be buried under a bunch of other
I
projects?
think I called it Networking.
Yeah.
And I think it's the only project I have under my personal self. I also have some stuff under the CAT, which is, or PSU CAT, or whatever we call it.
EDX cap.
EDX CAT. And so some of that stuff is also there, but and the main it's between my personal stuff and the EDX CAT stuff. By all means, but let me know what I'm just doing wrong or contribute, or if you are interested in this, you can follow me here or just let me know you're interested in, and if I have something that is a little bit better, I'll let people know. And if not, then you'll know it might take some discarding. But I kind of hope that this will be like a get the ball rolling kind of thing, and if a ball rolling, you'll at least have a chance to get us.
Yeah.
Or at least just on my
Keep that on.
Is that already done in time?
You got a minute if you want it.
Okay. I don't want it.
Can I have it?
Go ahead.
I actually wanted to, I just wanted to say I have it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Have you made a wiki before? Because you go to your networking meeting, you go and you click wiki, and it's like, hi, it's a wiki. And
I haven't, but I saw the button and gosh, if I click on that, it'll give me a wiki moment.
yeah,
So,
wrap it up, show us again.
pretty much, yeah.
The more I'm thinking about it, the more it's actually sounding like a reasonable idea, that proxy agent thing. I mean, it's a
Do I need
I think it's reasonable, it's workable, and it seems to me like it's, at least, until we can influence the vendors, the only way.
Yeah, if you want to use Puppet, that is probably the closest thing, that's the same way to do it.
Yeah. I'm not sure that it makes sense to use the same instance of Puppet for hosts as it does for networks. The only thing you gain by that is you could maybe have a service defined in a host that says, oh, and open the firewall hole for this, and then have the network portion say, oh, I'm configuring a firewall, I'll open that hole for that service and it's defined over there. But either way, that has to go in the hierarchy or something.
I mean, when you said a separate agent, I totally agree.
Yeah.
But what I mean is, there was also a comment about how to, do you want to run this agent as a proxy that lives on a host, or do you want to manage the fact that you're running it as a proxy? If you do that, you can actually have one set of resources that sets, that is a type of provider, and it's basically type proxy over one agent, or proxy agent, or network agent, what have you. And then if you tell host to say Dr. Katz, that it has a resource and type proxy agent value multiplexer.c.px.edu. And then you declare in your node definitions what multiplexer.c.px.edu should be. Then what happens is when it runs on Dr. Katz, it notices, oh, I have this proxy resource. So it starts up another instance of the agent, which the type of provider there knows that it's going to use a separate directory for all of its certs and libs and all that kind of stuff. And then it separately contacts the bookmaster and says, I'm multiplexer.c.cat.px.edu, what should I do? Bookmaster ships in a catalog. It then, being the proxy agent, the catalog is only going to contain switch types of resources, is then going to implement those types of resources to multiplexer.
The other sort of is that there's stuff that networking things do all the time, and there's stuff that networking things do. So I don't want to just say, oh, I'm going to say change the default image that all our switches should run on Tuesday. I might say that, hey, if you're going to have a new switch, you should update yourself to this. Ooh.
Now, I forget exactly how audit works for different resources and types, but the idea is that if you're auditing a resource, it doesn't actually change it. It makes a note. Hey, this doesn't match what's in the config. And then we don't really have an application to do this, but tools like Puppet Enterprise are then capable of you view the audit log, and it uses mcollecting to go back and enact any changes that you decide should actually happen. How that exists.
Well, yeah.
But it seems like a relatively same framework. So,
It's good enough that it can definitely teach us where it is. I don't know. You can look at that and say, well, I don't think you have these problems, but if you run it, then, with a non-trivial size network, you'll find out there's these problems. And it might just take some to do
but I think this is the same as, I've always kind of thought, I haven't quite found a way of wrapping my mind around integrating the Puppet brick, to use your analogy, into this thing. This would be a pretty good way of leveraging Puppet's declarative language and not breaking it or mangling it.
Yeah. Puppet's declarative language needs to work anyway. When you interface declaration, things like that. Oh, which you kind of read before you can talk about switching things. But the basis of the resource declarations and stuff like that.
I'm just curious and doodling at this point. This would be dangerous. It would allow you to use the resource anywhere without having to simply already exist on the host. Everything is encapsulated in the type. Stop provider.
We'll go to the next session. Do I need to figure it out? Or can I just use one
Continuous working, you could add the public documentation to your speaking.
This is all iClouds
Yeah.
and games. It's not
That's
real.
cool, I can hear it. I hope Dave's laptop picked them up.
I hope so too.
Oh, you were recording?